financial stability review published in May by the South African Reserve Bank says that household finances remain under pressure in line with challenging economic and employment conditions. Credit extensions to households increased faster than disposable income in 2019, reflecting a trend change. The composition of household debt has also moved increasingly towards higher cost forms of financing. Creating a culture of saving in South Africa is fundamental to improving the personal future well-being of its citizens. Investigating ways to encourage savings and shift excessive levels of consumption is vital. Savings Month is observed in July each year and aims to implement measures which mitigate against some of the challenges brought on by the global COVID-19 pandemic for the year 2020 and, of course, beyond. To discuss this further, we are joined on the line by Prem, Govender, Chair of the South African Savings Institute. Prem, thank you so much for joining us on Weekend Dawn. It's the culture of saving. How do you get that culture into somebody who's struggling right now, especially as we go into uncharted territory, the COVID-19 pandemic?
Good morning, Jacob. Yes, it's very much a taught habit. I think it all depends on the kind of relationship we have with money. Unfortunately, in South Africa, unlike other developing countries, we haven't embraced that culture yet. And I think the reason is quite simple. It's because we have too much access to credit. We've become a society of instant gratification. We want instant gratification. In other words, we want it and we want it now. We don't want to save for it. It's because we can access credit to get what we want. Is it any wonder then that we are such a debt-ridden nation as well as non-savers?
Now, how do we change that way of thinking? How do we become more financially literate? How do I instill that in my children, for instance?
Children learn by example. So if they watch their parents spend recklessly, they're obviously going to be doing the same thing. And if up until now you haven't inculcated that habit, I think COVID-19 and the lockdown has taught us some really, really valuable lessons. I think the people who survived comfortably are those who had savings to fall back on firstly, and secondly, they had very little debt or were basically debt-free. So, I think what one has to do initially is to take a hard look at your attitude towards money. You need to start becoming selfish, and by selfish I mean pay yourself first. Start saving first before you start spending. I understand that in the current circumstances that might be easier said than done, but I think if there's one valuable lesson we've learned, it's that when times are tough, we can actually cope. For instance, we've changed our whole way of eating, cooking, and I'm sure there's been massive savings from that. So why not carry forward those lessons into your future? That's one very good example.
Prem, earlier you mentioned something about South Africans are given too much leeway and given too much credit. How do other countries work about the whole credit issue, and could we take some examples from them?
I think we can. I definitely think we can. Like in countries like in India, in Brazil, who are very, in terms of economic development, similar to South Africa, they are a nation of savers. Their savings rate is far higher than ours, and they cannot access credit as easily as we can. Think about it. How often in the month do we get these random calls from credit card companies saying, would you like an extension of your credit? We have clothing stores who are constantly increasing your credit limit with no justification. I mean, they haven't done an analysis as to whether you can afford it. Because people are tempted, they say yes and they take it on. And so that is what we need to stop in South Africa. We need to carefully analyze each of these applicants or each of these creditors and check if they can actually actually afford this increase in credit. And I think if we stop that and if we start assessing each one individually, it will go a long way towards preventing people from indebting themselves the way they are doing right now.
And I think the best way to save, Prem, is obviously by starting with the small things, less takeaways and maybe getting a better insurance quote. What are some of the other tips that you could give for people to start saving the small rands and cents first to be able to have money for a rainy day?
Sure. So we haven't been able to drive around too much. A lot of us are working from home, and from what I understand, this might just become a permanent feature. If you are able to work from home, why go out to work every day spending 2 or 3 hours in traffic? So therein lies the first lot of savings. I mean, there's the saving in fuel. What are you doing with that money? Are you going out and spending it lavishly, or are you now putting that away? I remember we've had to carefully decide on what our meals are going to be, plan our meals, because we still are not going to the shops as often as we do. I use myself as an example. Because I pass a Woolworths and a Spar on my way home from work each day, I tend to think, look, if I run out of something, and I decide on the spur of the moment what I'm going to be cooking for dinner that night. But now I've got it planned right down to the T, where I go once a week to the stores, get what I want, and that's it. And I stick to that. And I found that there's a huge savings in doing that. The other thing is, and I know this is a touchy subject, but we've had cigarette bans, the banning of cigarettes. And I'm sure a lot of people have started to smoke less, or hopefully they start to smoke less. And again, there's savings there. We weren't allowed to do takeout. We still, restricted in terms of restaurants. There's a huge saving there. The other thing is, like you said, we should be looking at every single contract that we enter into, be it a cell phone contract, an insurance contract, whatever it is. We need to start reading the fine print. We need to start making comparisons. And you're right. If you take care of the cents, the rand will take care of the income.
Now, let's talk a little about payment holidays. I know some people were quite fortunate enough to receive payment holidays on their car repayments, on their house repayments, etc., which means that there's a little more money coming in, or a little more money in their back pocket. What's the best way to be using that money, specifically if you don't really need to be using the money?
Personally, I have dissuaded all of my clients from actually taking up this offer. You must understand that, that interest that you did not pay or won't be paying for the next 2 or 3 months, someone has to pay it, and eventually it does get capitalized to your account. So ultimately you will be paying it. Probably your repayment period might be extended by another 2 or 3 months. So, sometimes in the future you're going to have to meet that. So if you don't absolutely require the payment holiday, please, my advice is don't take it up. Because somewhere along the line you're going to have to make good that money. I think the same goes for employers. The revenue services have given us leeway by way of, holding back some of the PAYE and under providing for provisional tax in the next period so that we can make it up later. Ultimately, we have to make all these payments. So my view is, if you can cut down on other expenses, try and make your monthly payments. Also, I don't suppose the banks will actually hold it against you when it comes to credit rating, but I just think that, the fact that you have to take this payment holiday means that you're not in control of your finances.
And what would happen if you do have additional money, i.e. you get a tax payout and you get things like a 13th check or a bonus? What would be the best way to invest, or where would it be the best place to invest?
The best place to invest would be in your existing debt. So if you have debt and you have a windfall by way of a tax refund or, whatever it is, but if you are in debt, pay off your debt first. Remember, nobody pays you more interest than they charge you. So by paying off your debt, in fact, you are saving interest. So my view is, even if you don't have any money in the bank, if you are debt-free, you will survive when times like these happen again.
So I think it would be quite important to set targets, maybe set a target of being debt-free. That would be the most important thing for anyone and everyone out there.
Absolutely, and the way to do that is to sit down, have a hard, long look at your finances, and most importantly, draw up a budget. If you do not know where your money is going, how can you keep track of it?
Prem Govender, thank you so much for your time. Prem Govender is the chair of the South African Saving Institute, chatting to us about the importance of building a savings culture as Savings Month is observed nationwide. Remember, take care of your debt first and look out for the cents. They'll start building the rands. Some wise words there for Prem Govender, from Prem Govender, especially as we all go into these uncharted territories or uncharted waters called COVID-19. Look after your pocket and you should be fine in the long run.